over to you, Lee. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Daniel, for that introduction, and to all of you for joining on this cold Monday evening. Sort of an opening slide here, really, which encapsulates what we call the family journey. And it has been a journey. It's certainly not over yet. Certainly not if Daniel has anything to do with it. He's a determined young man, and I think through the course of this presentation, you'll hear that he was a very determined young boy as well. So this is a picture of Dan on the left, as many of our children start in the sport, in the ubiquitous lightning. And that's a picture of Daniel on the right hand side crossing the line in Pitești, Romania, when so forgive me, that wasn't Romania, that was the European Championships in Răsis, much to the chagrin of the Romanian paddler beside him. The presentation, I just thought I'd discuss where it all started for us as a family, and for Daniel, discuss something of our role as parent. I put parent, but parents, as more than one of us in this family. A little bit about Daniel's improvement when we saw him beginning to improve, get better, what that meant for us as a family. A little bit on life outside the sport, important obviously to keep these young aspiring athletes balanced and accomplished across all sorts of things, not just sport. Then to focus more specifically on Daniel's training journey, because training became very much more serious for Daniel. I'm discussing successes, highs and lows. We don't dwell on lows in this family, thanks to my wife's training. Everything has a positive spin. If it doesn't, you need to find it. And then to wrap up the conversation and the discussion this evening with some thanks. Whilst, as Daniel said, you know, parents will play a very important role in the development of these young athletes, it is by no means down to us, and there are a number of people certainly have assisted us and Daniel greatly in his journey to where he's reached today. So going on to the start of our journey, we delighted to say we have got two sporty boys. Daniel has an older sibling, Matthew, who is 2 years his senior. My wife, Debbie, is a very sporty individual. She's a qualified personal trainer, Nordic walking instructor, nutritionist, very health focused in the holistic sense. And she changed her corporate career when Daniel was very young to that focus since. So I would like to make a note really of the impact that focus on health and well-being has had on both boys' lives, their early lives. Then there's Dad, me. In 2009, I was challenged by a friend at my 40th birthday to complete the Devizes to Westminster Marathon canoe race. So I agreed to do that. I hadn't kayaked before in my life. I was a keen water sport enthusiast. I was a windsurfer way back. So I joined in 2009 Reading Canoe Club with the intention of completing this marvelous race, the Devizes Westminster. And I trained seriously for that, and we worked really hard throughout all the support races. The boys got involved together with my wife Debbie, acted as our support crew, as is required in that long 24-hour race. Once the race was over, we continued to use the canoe club regularly, and that really 2010 was the year that both boys started canoeing in earnest. And in 2012, Debbie and I agreed to do the race together. We're still married, which is good, and we had a tremendous time in that race. So the beginning, a picture on the left is I think there were a few tears that morning. Daniel was in the pea green coat with his back to us, Matthew, Debbie and myself coming up the steps at Westminster, having completed the race. The picture on the right hand side is our usual Sunday morning, a trip to one or other Hasler marathon race with both boys in the car. We're a canoeing family, so Debbie would be racing K2 or K1. I'd probably be racing K2 at one or other of the Southern Haslers or the nationals. At the start of Dan's career, along with everything else he's really done in life, he was highly competitive. He responded very well to reward. I think this is a picture of him at Basingstoke Canal Canoe Club, obviously being successful in one of his Hasler races there. The picture on the right hand side is Matthew and Daniel. They raced the nationals together. And I'll touch slightly on Dan was always looking for fast promotion. He wanted, if he was in Division 9, he wanted to be in 8. If he was in an ordinary wide Club K2, he wanted to be in the club racing K2 as this was. I think this Vida K2 was actually technically far too big for them. We added a lot of lead and they enjoyed their day and had a good race. I think I'll touch on the friendships a bit later, but I just really wanted to reflect on the picture in the middle as a picture from the National Canoe Marathon Championships. That year was held at Pangbourne. Dan's on the top podium, had a successful K4 race with canoeing friends on that podium that are still canoeing to this day, and in fact are in some cases program athletes themselves. Stephanie Hutchinson is there, Fred Kemp, and then just off Fred's shoulder is Philip Miles, and at the back behind Philip is Alex Greaves. So these youngsters, I think, are probably 9s and 10s, and you know, many of them today are still canoeing, I'm pleased to see, and very successfully too. Philip was also medalled at the European Championships in 2019, along with Dan. So these pictures probably are very similar to many of your family photo rolls. Basically, canoeing for our boys and our family actually was a lot of fun, and that's sort of where we kept it. The competition came from themselves. Then I'm going to move on and discuss sort of, I suppose, parenting within canoeing, and you know, I suppose the hard and the soft issues that we deal with. So for us, picture on the left, there was a lot of transport. Canoeing requires a fair bit of kit. Both boys at this point were very active hockey players as well, both playing for Reading Hockey Club. So we were sort of juggling weekends between hockey, canoeing, whatever was on the calendar. So for us as a family, there was a lot of activity, a lot of sporting activity, a lot of logistics, a lot of miles were traveled around the country, but very enjoyable too. The center picture is one of our dear club coaches, Ben, who was involved early on at Reading Canoe Club with Dan. That's a picture of Daniel's mother, Debbie, in the middle. So that picture to me sort of encapsulates the need for, as a parent, really to be close to the coaches, to pick up on what's being said, understand if there are any pressures or issues. Certainly in British hockey, when they were playing, there was a lot of discussion around coachability, i.e. how ready is the child athlete to to be coached, and how receptive they are to coaching directions. So I'm conscious that I've got one of Daniel's coaches on the call. I hope he might say that we've always been ready to liaise with the coaches and understand what's needed. On the right hand side, this is actually a picture taken at Reading Canoe Club, and that is Kate Walsh, England women hockey's gold medal. So for us as a family, we felt it was important to expose them to as many sports as they wanted to enjoy, notably in this case hockey, really to sort of provide a bit of sporting balance so that there wasn't, undue pressure. I suppose a little bit like a youngster at a buffet in a hotel, let them try something of everything and really decide what they want to eat, or in this case, what sport they want to pursue. Another aspect for us, which became reasonably significant, was the sort of need to understand that there needs to be really a balance between all the competing time needs on an individual young aspiring athlete. So, that covers school, friends, playtime, activities around the sport itself that you're focused upon, and how those sectors of time change when sport becomes serious, as it did for Daniel in no uncertain terms in sort of 2017 onwards. I need to give credit really at this point to Daniel himself. He's as I said, he's got an older sibling, and his older sibling was highly competitive at sport, very successful rugby player, and trialled for Exeter Chiefs, had a run out for England student as well before injury. So I think having an older sibling and a competitive, sporty older sibling had a bearing on Dan's development and appetite. But I don't want to really take anything away from Dan's got this uncanny ability to self-learn, and he's very forensic in his approach to sport or photography, whatever he chooses to turn his mind to. We found that with a Rubik's Cube, for instance. Within the space of months, he was completing the Rubik's Cube in less than 1 minute. He did the same with photography. He did the same with his hockey. And we started to see this intent interest in canoeing in all its forms at the beginning. It was, for him, it was marathon. He had a go in open canoe. There was no limit to what he wanted to try. So this is really just a slide encapsulating some of what we've discussed. Support for us, there's obviously the physical hard issues, making sure everything is right and done. There's certainly from time to time some emotional support required, and also the practical elements of running a busy athlete. And thanks goes especially to people like Daniel Thompson on the call here for the reverse admin that came through. We've talked about balance, health and well-being. I mentioned Debbie, my wife's background in nutrition, and I think this had a big bearing. When the kids moved to secondary school, there was a myth, I should say, that some of the kids started to say to them both, actually, because of the way they presented and their fitness, is it true that you've never had a McDonald's in your life? Well, it's not strictly true. We probably had a McDonald's with them once a year on the way back from a ski trip, but it wasn't weekly food. So nutrition was a big focus. You wouldn't want it to be a chicken in the Thames Valley when the boys were at the peak of their training. Lots of protein was eaten, lots of good quality protein, and there was also this holistic focus that Debbie brought to the family, which was on, sleeping, for instance, sleep well, sleep in the right way, mattresses, pillows, all sorts of additional things, if you like, that created, I think, a wider circle for Daniel and Matthew to draw upon. I'll touch on financial as well, because all sport increasingly ceases to be cheap, and I know as a sport, canoeing involves a lot of traveling, a lot of kit costs, etc. And for us especially, things got quite difficult around 2017, 2018 with a business I was involved with. And I don't think we would have been in the same shape without immense support from friends and family at that point. I'd also like to note sports aid involvement. Daniel was fortunate to be nominated and received a monetary award from sports aid. So just a note to you all to, you know, think widely when you're thinking it's too expensive. And it, I suppose as a dad, it was particularly difficult for me to, you know, make some of these calls. And you know, there came a point that we needed help and support, and that came from across the canoeing fraternity. We've got some dear friends who are involved in retailing. I know that, you know, Daniel seemed to be on the phone to people like Ivan Lawler every week talking about boats, and Mars Sport, our local canoeing business, and many others have provided levels of support to Daniel through his journey. I'm going to touch now on life outside of canoeing. I've mentioned Daniel's sort of sport appetite, which was insatiable. So Daniel was a very successful hockey player, and in fact he left canoeing probably when he was 13 to really concentrate on hockey, and reached county level. He's in the county Berkshire squad there, and actually reached a non-playing but GB performance group. So he was in the top sort of 50 players in the country, and really enjoyed hockey. We thought that would be his sport. And in fact, he turned to me sort of when he was 16 and said, look, I'm more interested now in canoeing. And I said, are you serious, Dan? You know, you're knocking on the door here of playing for England hockey, or GB hockey. And he said, no. He said, in his words, I think at the time, he said, canoeing's a fair sport. He said, it's very straightforward. I'm going to be picked on merit and speed, because at that point, sprint was sort of a preferred discipline of Daniel's. He was a very active runner, very good runner at school, played a lot of rugby at school, had some issues with his shoulders, a couple of injuries early on, and a broken metatarsal. So he took a few knocks, but he enjoyed cycling. He was a really keen photographer, and he's continued to pursue that hobby, and actually made a semi-career out of it with a drone a little while back. And then on the right hand side, this is a picture of Daniel with his housemaster at school. Daniel went to a local school to us, but actually stayed boarding during the week, which presented some challenges I'll come on to for training. So that's a picture of Daniel. I'm going to focus now on his training journey. As I said, he started age 9, 2010 at Reading Canoe Club. He became very competitive early on in the lightning races. As I said, he's a reward type person, and he enjoyed being successful in those races. He enjoyed the Hasler series of marathon races and sprints that we attended, and he, through the marathon promotions, reached Division 3 marathon. Initially, all his training was undertaken at Reading Canoe Club through the group club structure, and that worked really, really well. And a number of the club coaches there, we owe a huge amount to for their persistence in developing him as an individual and crew boat athlete. As I said, he took a break from canoeing to focus on hockey, returning in 2016. And he was promoted to Boys C sprint in the September, then on consecutive national events. He was promoted through the ranks to Boys A in 2017, and ultimately to Men's A he was moved to in 2018 after the April regatta. So Daniel's training load, as he started to be successful in sprint, increased significantly, certainly in 2017. And for us, this meant a significant amount of travel. Daniel was, together with another club athlete, Fred Kemp, given an opportunity to provide some training support to a then squad athlete at Dorney, Jessica Walker. And they took, with relish, they took up this opportunity and started doing 2 or 3 days a week over at Dorney Lake, providing training support, really. There is obviously a performance differential between men and women, but as boys get to sort of 16, 17 years old, there's the training differential, or the performance differential is the other way. So the boys were actually being used in a chase mode to support Jess. At this point, Dan was invited to the, forgive me, Daniel, but there are so many acronyms in this sport. I'm just going to call it ENTS. I think it was the English National Talent Squad. And be aware, we've been through it all with hockey as well, so I always used to transpose the acronyms. But anyway, ENTS was the training group, and he moved into ENTS and relished that. And there were many events overseas. There were informal international regattas that they attended to give them experience of competition, effectively away from the National Water Sports Centre. So they travelled abroad to Belgium a couple of times, and there were training camps that were organised around the anticipated European and world competitions. So I'm now going to move on to a couple of slides on successes, highs and lows. So as I said, as a family, we don't really focus on disappointments or lows. Although for Daniel, I think in his canoe journey, the 2018 qualification cycle was a disappointment. He had arrived back into the sport and it progressed rapidly, and he narrowly missed qualification to the Euros and Worlds in 2018. And I think for him, that led to a real uptick in his motivation to succeed in canoeing. And this also coincided in 2018 with much more regular, and I think Eric will correct me, probably daily attendance at Dorney, and at this point supporting Eric and Liam Heath in his training progress. So obviously Daniel isn't as fast as Liam, but there was a perception that there was this provision of benefit to the senior athlete. Daniel was certainly displaying all of the correct attributes in terms of his dedication and determination to train daily and train hard daily. The other low that affected us and possibly many others on this call was the ICF decision to drop the 200 meters as an Olympic event. Now, Daniel was very clear that his was an Olympic ambition, it was an Olympic dream, and 200 at that point was his chosen race. So he has absorbed that decision and accepted it, and he's now focused on a different distance. So let's focus on highs, because for us as a family and for Daniel, there have been many. This picture really encapsulates for me what this sport is about, and how fantastic the the moments after his first win, where he became European champion, junior champion in Rasice, Czech Republic. He came out of the boat weighing area, and there was no question that his parents were going to get there first. He was absolutely mobbed by his teammates, the close huddle of the K4 boys, and then the entire team were there. It was a complete win for the team in a single boat, if that makes sense to you all. But it was really, we were not far out of this camera shot, but it was really wonderful to see. Prior to that win in 2018, our squad had a successful K4 at the Olympic Hopes in Poznan, Poland, and they came away with a bronze medal in the K4, which was truly fantastic. We shared a really lovely afternoon there with other parents from that boat and the rest of the GB team that were there. In 2009, Dan set the K1 Junior 200 meter record, course record at Nottingham. He followed on to become European junior champion. It still gives me goosebumps and causes me to be emotional even saying that. He followed on a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, and was crowned world junior champion, which was, if I thought I couldn't, you know, enjoy a day or a moment anymore in the Czech Republic, then to do the same at the Worlds and to be present with the national anthem being played, with all of the other parents, with the whole squad, it was just the most amazing sensation. And again, remarkable support to us as a family, because people stepped in to ensure that Debbie and myself could be there, and we had family friends actually took the trouble to travel as well, which I know added to Daniel's enjoyment. Sort of associated with the sport, but Daniel was, I mentioned, nominated for a Sports Aid financial award, which he was successful at. And then Sports Aid each year undertake a competition, and I think thousands of athletes are nominated by their host sports. And Daniel was successful. He was one of 3 massively worthy winners of an award, a One to Watch award, anticipating that we will be seeing more of Daniel in the future. And then a local charity, Get Berkshire Active, crowned him in 2019 the Sports Personality of the Year, which was also truly wonderful. So this is a picture of Dan crossing the line and thumping the air, which is an iconic picture really for him, in Rasice, Czech Republic. And to the right, that's Matthew, our eldest son, and my mother-in-law was there with us. A truly amazing weekend. And then he followed up in Petsty with an equally phenomenal performance and was crowned world champion. I should say, I talked about resilience before. About 3 weeks after the last regatta before the European Championship, Dan was involved in a car accident up in Nottingham, and he suffered whiplash, and it was quite a traumatic event. Thankfully, other than the whiplash, there weren't any more serious injuries, but it really it knocked him. But true to form, he came through that. He had some treatment, physio treatment on his neck. He put it to the back of his mind, and he went out to the Czech Republic and did what he'd been trained to do. Thanks to Eric. And then they say pictures speak 1,000 words, and this was the most one of the most touching moments I had in Romania, when, you know, finally the rest of the crowd and his teammates had let him go, and we found each other in the stand. And this picture was kindly captured, I think, by Alex Greaves' father, who's standing there beside me. So that's my memory, and I can still feel that. I can still feel that hug today. 2019 was his season. He wanted to enter as many races as possible in the national championship. So he did, and possibly not unexpectedly, but with a really good squad of other athletes. He achieved gold in the K1 200, in the K2 men's 200, K2 men's 500, K2 junior 200, K4 junior 500, and then he got 2 silver medals, one of which I think was in no small part due to a severe celebration that they all enjoyed on the Saturday night. But, you know, at that part of the season, at the end of the season, all credit to him, he let his hair down and showed another side to him. I want to conclude the presentation by touching on all of those people really that have helped in Dan's journey, but also to Deborah, myself, Matthew, his family, the British canoeing coaches, Eric Farrell, Brendan Steed was involved in the early stages of Daniel's ENTS development, and Imogen Collins through Reading Canoe Club, and latterly through her role at British Canoeing as a coach. Their support, encouragement, expertise, I think, you know, each and every one of them take some of those medals that they've just seen on these prior slides. Reading Canoe Club as well. I think all of this these journeys always start with a canoe club. And, you know, I've often said if Carlsbad made canoe clubs, then I would probably make Reading Canoe Club. And I know we all have close affinity to our own canoe clubs, but it's a truly wonderful family club. There were also some very, very, very good paddlers at Reading Canoe Club, and I think that's important. Always, another takeaway this evening is always allow your athlete child to pitch themselves against better and better people. It's no use being the fastest canoeist in the club every day. You've got to find a faster canoeist to train against, to compete with, and ultimately, you know, if your dreams are fulfilled, to beat. So big thanks to Reading. Also, I've mentioned Daniel Thompson in the past. I mean, if I go back over my emails to British Canoeing as a parent supporting a talented athlete, you know, Daniel's name appears more than almost any other. There's a tremendous amount of work goes on behind the scenes to keep these athletes registered for competitions, to keep them compliant, to keep them trained, to organise events like this, to develop, you know, the support networks around the athlete. Also, Dawn, who is instrumental in organising the overseas trips. I've mentioned teammates and training partners, and if Dan was undertaking this talk, I think he would probably talk more about certainly his coach, but his teammates and training partners. And as I said, we've had this tremendous privilege of Daniel being able to provide supportive training to Liam Heath, previously to Jessica Walker, and other program athletes. Dorney Lake, I can't begin to tell you how many miles Daniel and I have travelled together, driving back and forth to training at Dorney. But it really is a place where dreams are made. And then finally, to, you know, our family and friends. As I've said, this hasn't been the story of a successful Lee and Debbie. Daniel would not be holding rosettes of flowers and wearing gold medals were it not for tremendous financial friendship support, training support from our family and friends. So that's where we'll wind up. 32 minutes on the clock, so I've overrun, but I'm not as fast as Daniel. So that's the conclusion, and really pleased to take some questions from you all.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you for that really interesting presentation there, and thanks for, you know, describing your parent role and some excellent tips on how you and the family have supported Daniel. If you want to take it off the presentation, you feel free to do so, Lee. So now's an opportunity really for anybody, if they wish to ask Lee a question, please feel free to either drop it into the chat, or if you wish to unmute yourself and ask a question directly to Lee, then please feel free to do so. We did have a couple of questions that popped through in the pre-webinar sign up, so I'll kick things off if I can, Lee, with a question. You obviously mentioned the support that you gave Daniel throughout this time, and a number of questions come through about sort of asking around the support that you've given Daniel. One of the questions was, what did you find the most difficult, frustrating aspects of being the supportive parents? Were there any times where there was any frustrating moments for yourselves as parents?
Frustrating, I think for us it was probably the challenge, the financial challenge I mentioned. I've been very candid about that. You know, I suppose like most families, we're sort of like swans or ducks. It all looks pretty serene on the surface, and you know, the boats are loaded and the kids are fed, but behind the scenes there's you know, for some time there was quite a struggle to ensure that we, or Daniel, you know, had entry to all of the events that he needed. And I think because of that external support to us, family and friends I've mentioned, he did turn up to every event, and you know, he did go to every overseas training event. So probably for me, if there was a frustration, it was just, you know, accessing funding. I mean, that's a very peculiar thing to us and our circumstances at that time. That would be my response, I think, to that.
Great, thank you. Don't think we've had any questions in the chat yet, but for anybody, feel free to ask a question, or you know, come and mute yourself. I'll just ask one other question. Regarding, obviously, Daniel's now transitioned from a junior athlete onto to being an under-23 athlete. How has sort of the role as a parent changed from now that Daniel's transitioned, and what is there anything that you miss the most, or do you miss anything at all, really?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, there's been a significant difference, and notably, really, from his self-sufficiency. That as an adult now, with his own car, he drives himself to training. I was involved only because my work enabled me to. Debbie, his mother, had to, you know, she was doing, you know, one-on-one physical training sessions with people, so she couldn't drive Daniel to training daily. So we shared, you know, or in fact he slept mostly there, mostly back, but 6 days a week there was a training run involved, which involved me in a car with Daniel, which, as all parents would tell you, you know, quality time with your child is very special, and you don't get that back. So at the moment for me, it's probably missing that that one-on-one time. He didn't always like me talking about canoeing, because obviously he was doing a lot of canoeing. We didn't need to talk about data, performance, and in fact that's a takeaway for people. I probably got a little bit, I'm an accountant by training, so I love numbers, but I probably got a little bit data hungry and was beginning to overanalyze things, and that, I think, wasn't helpful for Daniel. I think the athletes will know where they are. They'll know where they are against their peers. They probably don't need a parent, in this case me, telling them that, you know, they were only whatever 100th behind somebody in a different heat or something like that. You sort of got to do your work, get them to the event, and then allow them to have their event, and be there to support. As I said, things were difficult when he didn't qualify for the Euros and Worlds in 2018, and that's going to be different for every athlete, how you support them. But now he's sort of completely self-sufficient. I try and have conversations about canoeing, and it's in fact I did take him training last week. His car was in for service, so I got a chance to go back and revisit the old haunts and drop him at training. So that was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, you know, the car journey is you know, important part of the parent role, and yeah, the fact that you obviously don't do that as much now, but like you said, you know, having that parent role during the car journey and not over analysing, and if just choosing, if they choose to want to talk about something else, seems to be the case that you allow, and you know, let them to talk about what they want to talk about. I'm going to pop to Nigel's question on the chat first. Really good question from Nigel. He asked, when you realised Dan was special, what did you do as a parent to help his journey and dream?
Making this sort of relevant to canoeing, I suppose. As a family, you've obviously got choices, and you can choose to, you know, use your time in any way that you choose. So for us, when we realized that he had an aptitude, and his brother actually for that matter as well, we just made sure that we were more available for that sport. And we did the same with Matthew with his rugby, and we did the same with Daniel with his canoeing. You know, it was he can obviously go somewhere, but you know, he can't travel to Reading aged 11 on his own. We need to be there with him, and I think for us it was just maybe appreciating perhaps when, you know, they're between 11 and 18, they need your support, and you know, our time in terms of having more time for ourselves. I'm talking about Debbie and myself. Our time will come, you know, later on, but we don't begrudge a single second or moment, because we enjoyed the sport ourselves. You know, we'd race at Nottingham, even capsized once or twice at Nottingham ourselves. But no, that would be my thing, is be ready as a family. And even if it's just one member of the family. So, you know, as I mentioned, because of Deb's work circumstances, it sort of fell to me. And I actually felt for her that she was missing out on some of the daily training, because they were really sort of special moments, because I was helping the coaches whilst I was there, cycling and timing and helping with start gates, and really sort of got into the psyche of what was happening, which is why I think I would have been emotional anyway of him becoming European champion, but I was especially so in Recife when he crossed the line and won. It was it felt like we'd sort of been some of the way together.
Yeah, it certainly was a special moment. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Sally, have you got a question? Yeah.
So you were saying, as a family, you don't dwell on the negatives or those sort of moments that are more challenging. Have you got any sort of hints and tips about how to more, I suppose, spontaneously move on from those difficult moments where things haven't gone as well as expected?
Yeah, I think for us, it was probably learning, and most of this training actually came from Debbie. Debbie's very focused and has been on mindfulness and other techniques that just give people a bit of space. The intensity of competition is really quite hard, and we had a lot of coaching actually, and British England hockey were very good at this, because a hockey game is sort of full of collisions, and there is a winner and a loser. Whereas at least in canoeing, you're sort of, there are three positions, first, second, third, and you know, then you're very close. It's sort of like degrees of not winning or degrees of not qualifying, whereas hockey was quite blunt. And I think particularly young children became very upset and down at heel with a loss on the pitch. And there were some techniques there, and really it was, don't crowd them, you know, don't get onto them with 5 minutes after the game, and I'm using the game analogy here, but just let whatever's happened sink in, but do regroup, do as you would do if there was a silence over schoolwork or some other thing. Just make sure you go back in to just check what they want to do. And Daniel, I found at least, was always very dismissive of needing any help. He sort of rationalized what he wanted to do and reacted to it. And that reaction was, I think, in all respects, a positive reaction. And it's interesting with canoeing, because I put these pictures up with, you know, they are all friends. There's this tremendous friendship and sort of respect between the athletes. And then by the same token, come qualification time, you need to beat them to succeed. So, you know, success is rewarded then, but it doesn't stop, you know, the hugs flying in after an event, as you saw. But I'd never pass up the opportunity to check on the athlete, but I don't go in within 2 minutes of the event. Or even for us, it almost wasn't the entire car journey from Nottingham back to Reading. It was sort of the following day or more. And that's where coaches come in, certainly club coaches. So ordinarily, probably your club coaches will be with you. They can pick things up in training, and the best reset is to get back and race, and, you know, get back in a boat, whatever your discipline. If you're a slalom paddler or something, is, you know, don't give up.
No, it's good, helpful.
Okay. Dan, you're on mute.
I'm on. I've done the thing of being putting myself on mute and then started talking. Does anyone else have any other questions that they wish to ask Lee? Lee, if you want to come off mute or want to put the question in the chat, then please feel free to do so. I've got another question for yourself, Lee. It's around obviously balancing the family demands and the work commitments. So you mentioned that Daniel's brother Matthew also was involved in hockey. Obviously, Daniel did his sport as well. How as a family did you balance that family commitment and the demands of training and also work as well?
Yeah, well, for us, a lot of the competitions are weekend focused, both in rugby and hockey at the time, and canoeing. So often we would be split. It would be a 50-50, you know, one's going to rugby, one's going to hockey. And that's where I mentioned friends before. We had many situations, and we've been able to reciprocate, I'm pleased to say, where athletes have stayed with us, and we've hosted for a weekend and moved them back and forth to training camps. And similarly, you know, Daniel and Matthew have been able to enjoy that reciprocity from other families. So I think British canoeing are getting pretty good at that, but it was very prevalent in hockey, subject to all the usual safeguards that you maybe need one or two parents that cluster up. So, you know, we're not all driving all of the time. It's good for the environment as well, fewer cars.
Just want to see whether there was any other questions popped in the chat. We do have a question. Can I ask what Daniel went to do after A levels and how he continued his training? Okay,
so A levels obviously completed as his 2 race successes occurred in 2019. Dan has always been like self-starter, motivated, etc. He started having an ambition and was successful for a period trading rather stocks and shares, and had an idea that he was going to be a financial trader. Again, self-taught, and created his own trading patterns and so on. And that stopped, not through losses, just some frustrations with some of the trading platforms. He had an interest in his photography and design, and that has led on more recently to the establishment of a clothing business, Venus Lounge, and some of the youngsters may be following what he does. So there again, you know, recently he went out and purchased an embroidery machine and self-taught himself to use this machine. He's brought some screen printing equipment, and he's hand printing clothing, bespoke clothing. So he's understands that canoeing doesn't have perhaps the sort of salary that one might need to sort of live and develop long term. So he's sort of got his side gig, as he calls it, and that sits neatly with his training, because his training still is very much day focused. There is a pattern in the house, at least. He gets home, he's pretty exhausted and shot after training, and he'll rest up, and then a couple of hours of his own work, so to speak, and that's been his, if you like, his immediate response in tandem with his canoeing. He's also provided some training support to some adult athletes who are training for Devizes Westminster. So he's enjoyed some revenue from canoeing as well in that way.
Great, thank you. We had another question pop through. This one: how has lockdown affected his training? So also probably what's the impact, I suppose, on COVID as well, and how's that impacted Daniel?
Yeah, well, that I mean, not just to Daniel, but obviously to everybody. This has been one of the most significant events of a lifetime. In respect to his training specifically, as lockdown started, we were given immediately that 1 hour window of training, you know, outdoor exercise, etc. And he used that to full effect. My racing bike disappeared, and so he was cycling. We live in Pangbourne, very close to the Thames. So when canoeing was available, but not through clubs, his boats were returned home, and he would canoe, albeit without training partners. It'd be down with bungees and other training systems attached to his boat. British Canoeing was supportive. There was a weight rack that was delivered home. So, like many other canoeists, the summer gazebo became a permanent fixture. Eric very kindly loaned an ergo. In fact, there was Reading Canoe Club, actually, as a club, they went across their sort of performance athletes and said, right, first come, first serve. So all of the club ergos were distributed among the junior members. So there was an ergo here, which he used daily. And yeah, so he did as much land-based strength and conditioning and cycling as regulations permitted him, really. And latterly, thanks to foresight by the government, probably understanding that would be at a massive disadvantage to every other nation if we didn't, elite sport has been allowed to continue with appropriate safeguards. So thanks to Eric and others within British Canoeing who supervise this activity, because as I understand it, when they're in close proximity, there are daily tests, flow tests are done, and there's really strict protocols around you know, athlete welfare. And Daniel's in a small training group at the moment with himself and two other athletes and their coach. So they're able to keep a very tight handle and process. So he's training fully now. All that they've missed out on this year and last, obviously, is the ability to do an overseas training camp at this time of year. And ordinarily that would be somewhere like South Africa for a 3-week spell to build up for the forthcoming competitions.
Thank you, thanks. Won't keep you all evening or anything, so if I'll just ask if anyone's got any other questions, we'll just probably take 2 or 3 more questions. So please feel free to, if you like to unmute yourself and directly ask Lee a question, or if you wish to put that in the chat. Scott, one other question for yourself, Lee. and that was, is there anything that you would do differently if you could turn back time, go back again to the start? And is there any particular things that you would have appreciated knowing at the start of your journey?
Yeah, differently, it's difficult to say because we've obviously had a very successful outcome. I think perhaps actually I'm stumped. I'm not sure there is anything different. I think if we had the benefit of greater financial resources, maybe I would have shared the opportunity really more with Debbie. There would have been an opportunity for her to share more in these pleasurable activities. Seeing him train and so on. I think that's that. Sorry, there was a second question there.
Yeah, it was around anything that you know now and that you would have appreciated knowing at the start of the journey.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably there was a challenge. It took a pushback from Daniel for me to realise that the whole data thing was unhelpful and unnecessary. So, like all things, you'd prefer to hear about it immediately, but it doesn't work that way. It causes, frustration builds before it explodes. And there was no explosion, by the way. It was just, there was some obvious disquiet about it. So, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably would have stayed off the data, and respond to what he sort of needs really. It would be that.
Great, thank you. I'll probably draw this presentation to a close, unless anybody else has got any further questions. If you do have a burning question that you wish to ask Lee, and you don't want to ask it directly this evening, then please feel free to email myself, and then I can pass that on to Lee, and we can, Lee hopefully will be able to answer that for you. We'll also be, we've recorded this webinar, so we'll be uploading that onto the Talent Parent Programme webpage, and there'll be a sort of a follow-up infographic with the key sort of takeaways from this presentation this evening. And we'll finally, we're looking to run more parent presentations like this in the future. So they'll be advertised onto the England Talent Programme newsletters and through email as well. Have we got any last questions before I close? Eric, have you got a question?
Not really a question, Daniel, but just want to raise a glass there. It's my gin and tonic time this time of night there. So Lee, just many congratulations really, to both yourself and Debbie. Really such supportive parents, and thanks for providing the gene pool initially, but more importantly, absolutely brilliant support. I've had the pleasure of working with lots of parents over my coaching career, and I take my hats off to all you supportive parents that are on this call. These young athletes couldn't do it without you. And I just want to ask you there, Lee, were those tears of joy and seeing that flag go up, were they worth all those horrendously early mornings and long drives and a grumpy Daniel?
Oh, well, the answer is yes, Eric, 100%. They were absolutely tears of joy. And I do miss all those cold mornings. I mentioned to you that before the call started, sort of champions are built in the winter, and that was something I always used to say to Daniel, and there was never ever a moment he didn't want to turn up for training. I never saw that once. In fact, I mentioned the reverse. When money got very tight at one point, I turned around and said, look, Dan, I'm not sure we can do this sort of 5-6 days a week. Can we skip tomorrow or something? And then I found him getting the racing bike ready. He was preparing to commute by bicycle from Pangbourne to Dorney. Of course, I capitulated and drove him to training the following day. But there's no doubt in my mind that you would have seen him on his bike the following day. So there's one person not in the room today, that's Dan, and you know, he did a lot of this by himself with his self-determination. Notwithstanding why we're here tonight to talk about parents, you still have to have that burning desire in the athlete.
Yes, thank you for those kind words there, Eric. Yeah, just to echo Eric's words, thank you very much, Lee, for running this presentation this evening, and thank you for the time that you've taken to put together that presentation. Really appreciate that. Hope that this has been really useful for the parents and coaches that are being on the call. Please feel free to drop an email if there's any further sort of webinars or presentations that are topics that you would like to hear about, then feel free to let me know, and we'll endeavour to try to put something together to help you in your role as a parent. So to finish off, thank you very much, Lee, and thank you for your time this evening, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good luck, everybody. Stay safe, stay well.
Thanks, Lee.
Cheers. Thanks, Lee. Thank you all.